I will call this meeting of Durham Board of Selectmen to order on December 27th, 2022. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So we have two members that are excused absence tonight. So we have three, and per our convention, if we do have anything to vote on tonight, if it's not a 3-0 vote in favor or against, the motion will fail. Okay. Any amendments to the agenda?
Yes, so number 6.
Number 6.
Planning board chair will not be here as second.
Okay. Any other? Are you staying for the? Any other events? Check. Public comments. Anybody here for the public comment portion? Seeing none, we will move on. Okay. At this point, I would invite Jennifer Connors to take a seat in the recently renamed seat of opportunity instead of the hot seat. Ms. Connors is the auditor that has worked with us for several years, and in the course, she's here tonight to help talk us through some of the questions about trying to basically help us understand assigned funds and our account balances and everything. Jerry has been doing really yeoman's work diving in, essentially trying to figure out for sure where everything is, what the state of those funds are. And I should say there's no concern that there's like missing money or anything like that. It's just more understanding how the things are set up in the course of moving from a town administrator to a new town manager to an interim town manager and a new treasurer. There's a lot of institutional knowledge that has been kind of lost in translation through that. So this is a year where we're kind of reestablishing the baseline of where everything stands. So Jerry's been working with Ms. Connors to do that, and she's here to present some findings. So please offer any other background info you think is necessary for your presentation.
No, that's pretty much it. I did put together a presentation. It's a set of graphs, and for anyone that has an older version of this, I did update it this morning, so I apologize for the last minute changes. The first part of the graphs are basically an overview of the audit itself. It's a typical presentation that we do after we've done an audit. And then the last part, the last 3 slides or so, we talked specifically about those balances you just mentioned, the reserves, fund balances, and then at the very end we kind of have a analysis of available funds, which is basically your cash. So I'll just kind of jump into this, and then I wanted to say, if anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to jump in at any time. So,
yeah, just to hold that we did invite the budget committee to join us here tonight, so we'll have the presentation and then whatever discussion with the board or follow-up questions we might have, and then I will open it up to budget committee members if you have any follow-up questions that perhaps we didn't get to in our discussion with Ms. Connors.
So going to if you flip to the second page of the presentation, we have an overview of the audit itself. So the audit was actually performed the week of March 14th, 2022, which seems like a long time ago at this point. It was a little bit later than when we usually perform the audit. We came in January, but then we left since things weren't quite ready. Came back the week of March 14th. The reports were actually finally issued and dated on August 25th. And as far as the financial statements themselves, they did receive an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion on the financial statements. So that means your financial statements are materially correct. And then besides the audit of the financial statements themselves, we are required to do some testing under government auditing standards. And we actually issue a separate report for that. Under those standards, we are required to test internal controls as they relate to financial reporting. And under those standards, the town did receive a material weakness, which is kind of the highest level of finding that you can have. And that did have to do with the cash account reconciliations.
The highest bad level you can.
I'm sorry?
You mean like the worst level? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
All
What
right.
did I say? Sorry.
Well, you said the highest, but it's,
The highest
and I want to make sure
yes.
people understood that that wasn't a good kind of highest, it was a
No,
bad kind of highest.
sorry. The next step down from material weakness would be a significant deficiency, and we also had two significant deficiencies. One related to segregation of duties, and then the other one had to do with the preparation of the financial statements themselves and the audit adjustments. And I can go into those comments a little bit more if you'd like as well.
I think that would be helpful, just, so it's at least at a fairly high level, people just kind of know
Okay.
what that means, why that, we got that, so.
So as far as the material weakness goes, the reason that it was at the highest level or the worst level, as you pointed out, is because when we came for the audit itself, we discovered that full bank reconciliations had not been done since April of 2021. And so for that reason, there was a lot of unreported activity on the bank statements. So the accounting records didn't match what was actually on the bank statements. We did actually have to do some digging through several months to identify the activity that had not been reported. Thankfully, it was in your favor because they were mostly revenues that had come in that just hadn't been reported on the town's books. But since, knowing your cash balance is important, then it's something that really needs to be done on a monthly basis. And I know the town has been working on that since then. Jerry and I have talked about some of the steps that have been taken to get the town caught up on the bank reconciliations.
Yep.
And I know also that was a one-time thing, but unfortunately,
A one-time thing for like 11 months or something.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
The significant deficiency for segregation of duties. So for those that are not familiar with the concept of segregation of duties, that is when you take a procedure or a process and you break it up so that different employees are performing different parts of that procedure. The usual example that we use is cash. So typically, if you have an employee that has access to cash, you don't want that one employee preparing the bank reconciliations, doing the audit adjustments, preparing the deposits, and taking in that cash. You ideally would have different employees doing parts of that process so that there's some oversight, some different eyes on different parts of it. The more you have one person doing everything, the more likely it is that you're going to have errors or theft or something happen that someone's not going to catch. And then the last part has to do with the preparation of the financial statements themselves and the audit adjustments. We did have quite a few audit adjustments, more so than we have had in the past, and the preparation of the financial statements would just be actual preparation of the schedules that we need to perform the audit and prepare the financial statements.
Is that last one, is it related to just the inexperience of staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just not knowing what needed to be done with
Yeah.
the audit itself.
Okay, great, thank you.
The next graph that we have is an overview of the general fund balance. And the fund balance is broken down into 5 different categories. And the first balance is non-spendable, and that is a balance, it's what it sounds like, it's a balance that is not readily available to be spent. In 2018, you actually had a fairly large non-spendable balance, and that had to do with prepaid expenditures. There was none in the current year. Restricted fund balance, those are amounts that are restricted by external sources and how they can be spent. Typically, those would be grants and donations, scholarship funds that the town can only spend on those very specific purposes. Committed fund balances, those are amounts that have been set aside for specific uses per town vote, and they are non-lapsing, so they carry forward from year to year. And we will talk some more about those. Those are mostly your capital reserves.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say, that's what we would call our reserve funds.
Yes, yeah, so public works reserves, fire and rescue capital, and so on. We'll get into those details.
Okay.
The next balance is the assigned fund balance, and those are amounts that are carried forward to be used mostly in the next year's budget. The town does treat its assigned fund balances a little differently in that those amounts are specific revenues that were received in 2021, but they've basically been earmarked to be used in the 2022 budget. So if they're not used, then they do lapse to unassigned fund balance.
Yeah.
There is no future carry forward of those amounts. And then finally, the last category you have is unassigned fund balance, and that's the balance that is left over after you put amounts into those other categories. It's the amount that carries forward and can be used for any purpose.
I'm sorry, could you back up one on what you said about the assigned fund balance? Because that sounds, what you said about what happens at the end of the year, that sounds different than what I think I read in the email earlier. That I thought, so assigned fund balance, that if it was unspent, did I hear you say that unspent, it would lapse into undesignated or lapse back into that assigned fund?
Into unassigned fund balance.
Okay, is that,
Those-
would that
Sorry,
be
Brian.
like, what would an example of one of our, would that be like recreation or?
Nope, so an example would be excise tax revenues.
Oh,
You typically
okay.
identify those to be used in the next year's budget. Typically, they're shown as offsetting the amount raised for public works
Okay.
expenditures.
Okay,
So, for example, in 2021, you had excise taxes that you collected that you would be using in the 2022 budget. But if you didn't spend all of that amount, the operating amount, it would just lapse to unassigned fund balance.
okay.
So- And then total fund balance did increase by about $216,000 from 2020 to 2021. The next couple of graphs are just an overview of the budget's actual information itself, to kind of explain why fund balance did increase in total. You can see that taxes were about $61,000 higher than budgeted, and that had to do with collections on prior year taxes. The budget only reflects the 2021 commitment, but sometimes you are still collecting on amounts that were committed in prior years, as well as you had some unbudgeted supplemental taxes. Intergovernmental revenues were also higher than budgeted due to higher than anticipated state revenue sharing. Charges for services were about $115,000 higher than budgeted due to unbudgeted fire department revenues, which included ambulance billings of about $99,000, plus higher than anticipated sewer user fees. And overall, you can see total revenues were higher than budget by $318,000, which is about 3% of the budget.
Where in here would the ARPA funds that we've received be?
Those would be in intergovernmental revenues.
What about on the previous slide in the fund balance? Which category would those?
They are sitting in committed fund balance.
So why would committed fund balance be, I mean, if we.
They're either
would be-
committed or restricted, one of the two.
Okay. What I was wondering was, that's a pretty big jump in unassigned from 20 to 21. And that, my question was, are the ARPA funds in there?
They are not sitting in unassigned.
Okay, okay,
Those would definitely be set aside in one of those categories.
okay.
And then on page 5, we have the same analysis of the general fund expenditures. So again, it's just a budget to actual analysis, looking at the larger variances. General government expenditures were under budget due to turnover in the manager/administrative assistant position. Public safety expenditures were under budget due to the budgeted but unused capital amounts. Public works expenditures were under budget due to budgeted but unused capital amounts as well as the timing of some of the projects. Unclassified expenditures were under budget by about $106,000, and the reason is that includes overlay that was only used to offset about $1,200 in abatements. And then capital improvement expenditures were under budget, again, due to the timing of projects. So overall, total expenditures were under budget by about $303,000. The next two graphs are just an overview of the general fund expenditures. So each piece of the pie is a function of the town. Each percentage is the that portion of the expenditure compared to total expenditures. So for example, education makes up 56% of the town's total expenditures in the general fund. And then on the next page, we have the 2020 expenditure distribution, so you can kind of compare the 2 years to see where they've changed. Overall, the categories stay relatively the same from year to year. Education did increase by 2%. Capital outlay actually decreased by 5%. Public works increased by 2%. Community services increased by 1%. And then all of the others stayed the same. And I did want to point out too that unclassified is showing up as 0, and that's not because you didn't have any expenditures in there. It's just that with rounding, it's less than 1%. So. Okay, so the next 3 are talking specifically about the balances we just talked about. So committed fund balances, again, those are the amounts that the town has voted to carry forward, and they do not lapse unless you have another town vote that basically rescinds that original vote. And I want to point out that the balance in the third column from the left of $473,000, that is the amount that appears on the financial statements, and it's also the same amount in that graph that we looked at before for fund balances. However, what we found is that there were certain adjustments that will need to be made to those balances. So the total of your reserves actually should be $793,000. Jerry and I have been kind of going back and forth with the balances. He did talk to Ruth, and she brought forward some information that I did not catch. So what we will do is we will adjust those balances going forward so that they reflect those adjustments. One of the adjustments that we made, so when I came to the audit back in January, I talked to Kathy, who was here at the time, and she talked about how the town was getting away from moving unspent appropriations to the reserves. So what that is would be, for example, if your telecommunications budget, you budgeted $30,000 and you spent $22,000, then that $8,000 would get moved into the telecommunication reserve. The version of the spreadsheet that she gave me did not have those amounts on there. So I assumed that they were basically eliminated. They were not. So those should have actually been added to the reserves. And when I went back and looked at the warrant articles for 2021, what I realized is the way that they're worded is the town eliminated, let's see if I can word this correctly. The town eliminated the transfer of unspent appropriations for the operations budgets for public works and fire and rescue only.
That's right.
So the amounts that should have still been transferred to reserves were the unspent appropriations for telecommunications, the unspent appropriations for recreation, the unspent capital appropriations for fire and rescue, and the unspent capital appropriations for public works. So you can see that we have an adjustments column here and then a final amount. Those amounts have been added to the total of the reserves. The other thing that we caught, and that I did not catch originally, is on the spreadsheet, there is an amount for appropriations. Those are amounts that have been voted on to be added to the budget from the reserves. In addition, there's also a column for expenditures, and some of those amounts were actually doubled up. So in the fire and rescue capital, there was an appropriation of $60,000. In addition, there was also an expenditure for $57,000. And what I didn't realize is those two amounts were for the same item. So it should have been one or the other, but not both. So the $57,000 expenditure has been added back. In addition, in the public works capital reserve, there was also an amount of $180,600. That was also doubled up. So that amount has been added back as well. Did all that make sense? That was a lot of explanation.
Makes sense to me because I've been looking at it for a couple of weeks, but I don't know. Yeah, Josh.
Yeah, no. Makes sense.
So I get the one, and as part of your discussion, then I think, I can't remember if we talked about this or not, you know, to offer like, maybe like best practice that we should be using to chart things like this going forward so that we don't lose track of things. Because I know sometimes what happens, and I know with the 180 whatever thousand that you just mentioned, that was a result of a plow truck for Public Works that was approved, like I believe in 2020, and we ordered the truck and all that. The truck wasn't actually delivered, and the check wasn't actually written until 21.
Right.
And so but it was a 2020 vote and appropriation. So the accounting and tracking that through, I mean, any help you can offer on a best practice for us to use going forward would be.
I will say that the spreadsheet that has historically been used to track these balances tends to be over cumbersome and overly complicated. And that is why these things were missed, unfortunately. At the time when I did the audit, we did a draft of the financial statements, but there wasn't really anyone at the town who was familiar enough with these balances to know what they should be.
And quite honestly, ideally, correct if I'm wrong, but it shouldn't really require that. It should be pretty self-evident in the documentation about what's happening, right? So I guess that's what we're looking for is how should we be documenting these things going forward so that, you know, when somebody new comes in or, you know, a new auditor or whatever, you know, everybody knows the story.
Right. Yeah, and again, that's something that Jerry and I have discussed,
Yeah.
and I will be working with him on figuring out a way to do that in a more simple way. So.
Great.
On the next graph, we have the restricted fund balances, and these are the amounts that are, as I mentioned, they're restricted by use, typically by the state or an outside agency or someone that has donated money to the town. And I did make the distinction of the amounts that are set aside in separate bank accounts as opposed to the amounts that are carried in the general fund itself. And that's something that we're also going to talk a little bit about, is that a lot of these balances, even though they've been committed or restricted, they're still sitting in the general fund operating account. So they're kind of all mixed in together, with the exception of a few separate bank accounts that have been set up. So in the committed fund balances, the restoration fund and the unspent bond proceeds are in their own bank accounts. And then in the restricted fund balances, the River Park project and the scholarship funds are held in separate bank accounts. And then everything else is in with a general operating account.
And should those things be in their own accounts, like each of the things on this list on?
They don't necessarily have to be.
Okay.
It would definitely make it easier to track them. And that's something, one of the steps you might consider taking is maybe putting some of the larger reserves into their own accounts. But
Cash flow,
yeah, exactly.
that's where it comes.
Yeah, that's just for cash flow is right, as Jerry says, is the reason they're all the same account, because of the peculiarities of our calendar fiscal year, and then we approve a budget in April for a year that started 3 months ago, and we don't collect any money for it until 8 months into it,
Yes.
that's what creates the cash flow situation. So if we took all that reserve money now and put it aside in its own account and wasn't available for operating expenses on a month-to-month basis, then we would have a serious cash flow problem and would need to be taking out a much larger tax anticipation note much earlier in the year than we normally do. So more to come on that one, because that will be part of the discussion on potentially moving to a fiscal year versus a calendar.
Yeah, and that actually leads right into the next slide. So the very last slide that I have here is kind of an analysis of what you just said, is basically a cash shortfall. So your total operating cash as of December 31st, 2021 was $4,038,000. Within that amount, you are carrying restricted balances of about $13,000 and committed balances of about $711,000, which leaves about $3.3 million available for operations, which is about 4 months worth of expenditures. However, as you mentioned, since taxes aren't due until the beginning of August, I did kind of a rough calculation at the top where your non-tax revenues for the first 7.25 months and your estimated expenditures in the first 7.25 months, you would have a shortfall of about $247,000. That is an oversimplification. That would be assuming that all of your non-tax revenues kind of come in equal installments and that your expenditures are all incurred, which, on an equal balance, which they don't. And I will point out too that those expenditures are strictly just your operating expenditures. So I did back out of that number any capital related expenditures. So this is based on your 2021 actual expenditures, but that is backing out around $215,000 worth of capital amounts. So if you added those in, the shortfall would actually be more than that. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions about?
I have a question about something else.
Okay.
You
I don't know what you're different, let me know at the time.
So back on slide, the second slide,
Sure.
you addressed the material weakness that related to the cash account reconciliations.
Yep.
And you addressed the significant deficiency related to preparation of financial statements and audit adjustments. But the segregation of duties, to me, when you're talking about it, seemed somewhat difficult with only having 2-3 staff members. And so how do we address that issue?
That is a good question. Because really what you're going to have to do is sort of cross-training or have it set up in a way so that you have eyes on everything. So for example, if you have one person that is running the AP warrants and cutting the checks to go out the door, you typically want to have somebody else that is reviewing those warrants. That's not really an area that's an issue. It's more of the reconciliation process and the cash process itself. Because as of right now, I guess you're it, right?
So I'm gonna take over the reconciliations once we get to a bottom line to help out with that process. So I'll do the monthly as we get going now with the treasurer from having to do at least that. So I can help out there. So you don't want this person she's writing the checks. So you don't want her reconciling the bank statements either. So that's all part of all of us trying to find our groove and what we're good at, strengths, weaknesses, and going forward. Again, 4 months in, so I'm still trying to figure all this out and how I'm gonna be able to manage this.
Yeah, and that's to an extent, but when you were talking about cash, accepting cash, I think, and so, I mean, I understand this is, not something that's serious, but it's something that was raised.
Right,
And how do you segregate those duties when everybody at the window everybody's accepting cash?
right.
And so,
So what we've done is they cash out their own drawer. And it gets difficult. So the treasurer has some other duties that needs to get done for part of this reporting. And so she cashes out at noon time, but the part-timer comes in and takes over that cash drawer. And then the part-timer at the end of the day cashes out her own, and the clerk cashes out her own. Before, they were cashing out each other's drawer, and that can get a little dicey, because if something were to go wrong, then this is gonna go on and say, what did you do? And so, to avoid those situations, just like in a bank, if you're a teller at a bank, you're cashing out your own drawer. So we're trying to do that as we move forward. It gets difficult, because there are other things that we need to do, but yet they gotta do the window at the same time. So it's hard to, with the staff we got, it's difficult. There's no question about it.
Yeah, ideally, for the people that are actually taking in the cash and handling the cash, you should have somebody else who's basically doing the entries for those amounts and basically looking over their work for the day, maybe signing off on it, in an ideal world.
thank you.
And to be fair, that's not a new message this year, that you've raised that annually, I mean, almost, that it's, that it's something that a lot of small towns deal with because of small staffs, but I think the dollar amounts are getting bigger and things are getting more complex, and so I think, Jerry's taking some steps to try to move us down the road a little bit more and segregating those duties as much as we can.
Yeah, the main reason that we had that in there is because of the turnover. When Kathy was there for the majority of the year, she was basically doing a lot of it herself. Whereas in an ideal world, she would have had one of the other people in the office doing the work itself, and then she would have been overseeing it, signing off on it, and making sure it was accurate. But that wasn't happening because she was doing most of it herself. There wasn't really another set of eyes on it, so. That's it actually for what I have, unless you have further questions or comments.
No, any from the board?
No, as Jen said, we've been talking, and we talked about, like on page 3, we have these committed and assigned, that spreadsheet that we've been trying to decipher. All of that is commingled in the same spreadsheet, which made it
Yes.
extremely convoluted and difficult to follow.
Are you planning to separate and
Yes.
maybe label the way these are labeled, like
Yes,
those accounts?
That's what we talked about, exactly.
Because you almost need a translation document now, because we've used different terms over the years versus
Yes.
what's here, so that would be a great thing to have everybody using the same terms and having the same understanding of what they need.
Right. Because coming in, it's been very difficult to try to figure out, but as we move forward, I'm gonna work with Jen, the auditor, to come up with a better system that we'll all understand and I'll share.
Yeah,
And that's-
I want to just publicly credit you again, I mean, the work that Jerry's been doing, I mean, the analogy I would use is, I've been coming in to try to solve a jigsaw puzzle with no reference picture as to what the puzzle is supposed to look like. I mean, and he's been doing a great job, and he's getting it figured out, and there's still, more work to be done, but I think the board, I'll speak for the board, just, we feel pretty good about the work Jerry's doing, with the auditor, and he's had other people in here as well, trying to again, reestablish that baseline, and so that on a go-forward basis, we know what everything is.
And I appreciate that, but really, it's just bringing in the right people to help answer the question. I mean, I asked Jen today, she had a time for a 2-minute phone call, and it ended up being 30 minutes, so just to try to get to the bottom of where we are. 'Cause
Bill by the hour?
It's important. So, but I appreciate that. It's been good.
So, so if that's it from the board, I would open it up to any, and there are a few budget committee members here tonight, if any of you have a follow-up question. I mean, we may not have the answer tonight. It might be something we need to do a little further, digging on, but Milt had his hand up first.
I'll defer.
Well, you did bring up a good point there, Kevin, about the segregation of duties. My major concern was, since this audit has been done by the same auditing agent, had this been brought up in prior years, which it had.
Mhm.
And it sounds like that we are addressing that now. One question I guess it is in relationship to the audit, would be, is Ruth assisting with determining some of these items with Trio versus a spreadsheet?
It's only been the spreadsheet, not Trio,
Okay.
her spreadsheet.
To figure out
To help me figure
current
out
state, but I think your
The
plan,
20.
the plan going forward is to get it all in the Trio.
Yeah, but you're still gonna have to have spreadsheets involved somewhere, but just better organized and more focused on, like I said, a committed balance and an assignment balance, and not have them commingle in the same spreadsheet.
I was under the impression that we were going to be using Trio solely and having the ability to download that into a spreadsheet.
Well, you can use Trio to track your balances, and then when you spend that money, you can go in and do an entry to know you're taking money out of that fund and pay for it, but it's gonna have to be tracked in a spreadsheet. There's really no other way
Okay.
to do it that I know of.
There may be a way that you can do it, and I can talk to you about that.
Okay.
I know some other clients that use Trio that have set up separate funds outside of the general fund to track reserves.
Yeah.
So that might be a possibility.
Right. But there's no way that it automatically comes out. You'll have to go, like, if we buy a $7,000 scanner like we had, that's gonna have to be tracked, that can be tracked in Trio under general.
It can, if you code it as an expenditure to that reserve fund instead of having it go to the general fund.
Okay.
So, but it would require some work because you would have to set up a whole lot of accounts.
Right.
In Trio. So
Yeah.
that is a possibility.
Okay.
Thank you.
When is the next audit scheduled for?
February 6th,
And we'll have that report when?
that's a question for her.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So if the next audit is scheduled for February 6th, ballpark, when can we expect the report to be issued?
Well, hopefully sooner than August. I'm not sure I can answer that until we actually do the audit, because it depends on how ready the town is. And if we run into any issues, so.
But it is usually a somewhat lengthy process, right? How often do you turn around?
Typically, we come for the audit, in the past, we've come for the audit around the third week of January, and then we typically will issue the reports month and a half later, somewhere around there.
So if everything was, if everything went nice and smooth, so around April 1st, we might see the report?
I can't make any promises,
Right, I
but yeah, that would be
A
a
month,
good
a
goal.
month and a half is the norm for
Yes,
a report.
But that's a big if, because we have employees that don't have the experience that you had in the past to be able to put that stuff together, so.
It's not Jennifer that does the report?
It is, but it's the information that we give her so she can do the report.
So she might have questions on February 6th that you're saying might not be able to be answered in a timely fashion?
Could be how to go last time. You can speak to that. Maybe.
well, as I mentioned, last time we came in January, and then we had to wind up rescheduling and coming back in March because not everything was ready. So,
I think maybe an analogy might be like if you had an accountant doing your taxes and you just drop them off a box full of random papers and receipts versus a nice organized,
Right.
paperwork and whatever, you're gonna get one a lot sooner than you're gonna get the other one. And I think, that last year was, more the box of random paper than the well-organized. And so we're making progress towards the well-organized materials. I'm assuming we have some sort of a preparatory checklist of
Yes.
or something that you need, and yeah, so, we're gonna do our best to get it as soon as possible.
Yeah, there are a lot of year-end adjustments and reconciliations that are done that only happen at year-end for the audit and don't happen any other time of the year. So that's something that we'll have to address as far as the audit preparation.
But if you've never done it before, it might not go as soon as you like it to.
Right. Yeah, so we're still in a learning curve. Yeah,
Right,
for sure.
yeah,
We are.
absolutely.
Yes, Joe.
Jill Gaston, Gay Stackpole Road, since I haven't met you officially.
Yeah.
Hi.
I do it.
So the question that I have, which I don't desire an answer tonight, is what is left for training? Like, what do we need for training to get everybody up to speed so that we are, whether it's training or organization, to have Trio the way we want it to have the spreadsheets the way we want it to. And to meet those goals, what is required? Do we need to bring in an outside trainer? Do we need to pay the auditor extra to get things done? Kind of creating a plan, because it has been, in my opinion, too many years where this has been disorganized. And knowing that we do have ARPA funds, I think this would be a great way for that kind of one-time expense to get people trained and get people doing this properly. So that if we do have changes in roles again, it is clear and flowing as to what's what.
Well, Trio is it's a big program, so training just doesn't happen like in 1 week's time or 2 weeks' time. It's gonna have to be over a series of classes like any training is, depending on what you do with your Trio. I mean, it does everything. It does our payroll, it does our taxes, it does everything. So, I mean, that's over, to get a treasurer really trained, they're gonna need 2 or 3 years of experience to even get there. So it just has to be, we have to fund it, first
Right.
of all.
And that's why I'm asking the
Yeah.
question, because it hasn't been really brought up before in any of the budgets that I have seen, where we have a brand new person, they need to learn Trio. We need to set aside money to send them to school and training for this so that they're doing it right.
Yeah, or someone to come in and train them will cost money as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, or if it's a membership to the 1-800 Trio line, I don't know, but that's what I'm kind of curious to make sure that it is, that we do have a plan moving forward.
I'm doing my best to put it in the budget that you'll pass or like. That's all I can do. I'm 4 months in and still trying to figure it all out myself. So, yeah, we'll see. You will see more money in the training line this year. To help, facilitate that, get going, and get people trained.
Mhm.
I've actually hired someone to come in and do the bank reconciliations to get us caught up so we have a bottom line. And then from there, I'll take it over from there. But I couldn't do it back from April 2021. It was just too much when I'm trying to figure everything out. So
Mhm.
hopefully that'll get done and we'll have a bottom line and a bottom line of reserves. That's what this whole process is, just to try to get me to a bottom line, and then we can move forward with better tracking, better communication, better everything.
Right, I just knew it's gonna take money,
Yeah,
so that's why I
I
wanted.
want to reel this back into any questions that might be relevant with Ms. Connor's expertise, since she's here. She doesn't need to listen to that conversation. Any other questions specifically to the audit or the report or Ms. Connor?
Ms. Connors, I have a question. With regards to the staff regarding the money, and would that be eliminated if we didn't take cash?
As far as the segregation of duties,
Yeah, as far as,
You mean if we only took credit cards or debit
no,
cards?
I mean,
checks, or-
we use cash also as an overall term to really talk about any kind of payments that you take in, because, I mean, you're still taking in a lot of checks, you're still taking, credit card payments, you have ACHs that are coming in automatically, but someone still needs to be able to,
it's more than just.
authorize those, reconcile them. So even though you're not necessarily getting paper bills across the counter, it's still cash.
No, I understand that. I was a little bit confused as to who we were talking with the component of the 2 employees per se working in their drawer. I think the drawer got me a little, got me thinking on that line, because, you know, a lot of places are going with cash simply because of those particular reasons. There's really no way to follow through on where it goes, where a check, you can see if somebody wrote a check for some dollars or a credit card, it's
Right.
usually not missing at the end of the day.
I mean, ideally, the less cash you handle, the better, because it does reduce the risk, if you have a paper check as opposed to a
Sure.
$20 bill.
Yeah.
So if you can reduce that some way, honestly, I don't know how many people still pay in cash. I'm sure there are some.
You get a few. Are you ready to make a question, or because you're still paying cash?
My point was, my point was gonna be that cash, check, or credit card, there's still a receipt that has to be brought up. So that should be part of the reconciliation. So even if you're paying cash, you've got a receipt there that says you put that much in that drawer.
Yeah, you can back check that, but it's the drawer, it was in the drawer, but where to go from the drawer? You know you have a receipt, you know you took in cash, but where is the cash? That's typically a lot of problems with, you know, even businesses that take in cash. Sometimes it's hard to track when the cash came in versus when the cash went out. Right, Chad?
Most of our receipts.
You're not wrong.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you, especially on a holiday week. Appreciate you making time to
You're welcome.
come out and meet with us tonight. And I guess it's, from what Jerry tells me, it's somewhat standard operating procedure that you come to the towns and do something like this, you know, after each audit, and just Durham's not done that in the past. So I think we would continue, you know, keep that going as a practice to, you know, have them come and report out, you know, after the audit next time.
Yeah,
Great.
I can certainly do that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Next on the agenda is AmVet's liquor license application. This is a, come on, this is a, they have a license now, but they're looking, I think you're looking to upgrade it, so is that the term you use? Yeah, so why don't you tell us what you're trying, what you're interested in doing.
Our current license is a
Oh,
club.
sorry, introduce yourself.
Oh, sorry. I'm Nate Ledger, I live on Brianna Drive. I'm the finance officer for the American Veterans Club. We currently have a license that is a club with outdoor. And so our on-premise license is for our basement area only. That's our the walls of the downstairs. Whenever we hold an event upstairs or horseshoes out back or any type of event outside of those walls, liquors, it's a BYOB. And so say you want to have a wedding party upstairs, and that's fine, you can rent the hall, and then you have to fill out a BYOB permit. And so throughout the year, we're coming to the town always for those BYOB permits because it's required. We're trying to lessen the burden on the town, because clearly what we're supposed to do is you're all very busy. We're also trying to lower the liability on our end, having BYOB, because BYOB tends to turn into not being able to bring your own beer, it's bring your own gallon of whatever you want to drink. And so for liability purposes, for lessening the burden on the town, for just overall better practices, what we've tried to go to is a club with catering. And what that means is we can leave the premise of our license, which is the basement, go upstairs and cater an event, which means the BYOB permits are no longer allowed. You have to get it catered from us.
So they wouldn't be able to bring their own?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so once we move to that license, it's not an option. You cannot bring BYOB. And so on our rental agreement, and Chad, correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to upgrade our rental agreement that says, okay, yes, we want to rent your hall, the next line item would be, would you like it catered with alcohol? And that would be through us, catered by us, and say, okay, we're gonna provide you with a bartender, we're gonna provide you with service, and then that way we can now regulate our customers more appropriately. And then the BYOB permits from the ambets would go away. It does allow us to cater as well, say there's a fair or an event somewhere, we'd be able to take Durham ambets post 13 and go join like the Cumberland Fair and do a beer tent with the rest of the Legionnaires or whatever else.
Off your premise.
So long as we still abide by that town's liquor license permitting requirements or whatever else. And so it allows us to go off premise. Our premise is just the basement. That's the only thing that's premise. So when we say premise, everyone always thinks of ambets as a whole, but the liquor license, the premise is just the basement. I keep referring to my commander there, but he'll stop me if I say anything wrong. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't know, go ahead, I don't want to interrupt.
So the premise is just that basement. So what we're trying to do is, okay, if you want to have alcohol being served out back, we want to provide you the bartender to make the drinks appropriately for less liability, and then to stop with the BYOB permits.
It sounds like a complete win-win for you.
It is.
And so my question, which has nothing to do with how I feel about it, is,
Sure.
what is the effect on the town? Do we get any money when they come in for asking for a permit? No, right?
No, we're just, as a municipal authority, we have to approve.
Right, but you have to pay the
liquor
state.
licenses.
We have to pay the state. So it's an increase, the current license that we're on is 495, 450, somewhere around there. And it increases to $900 to the state.
For each BYOB permit you have to pay the state.
Every BYOB
Yeah.
permit, we have to pay them $10 for their filing fee for BYOB permit.
The resident does.
The renter does.
Correct.
Yeah, whoever wants the BYOB permit.
Any other?
And so earlier, before we started, you had asked the question, new versus old. When I contacted the state, our license and our on-premise license, it doesn't need to be inspected. We still are legally authorized in that premise.
Yep.
We're just asking for the with catering caveat, so that now we can bring a bartender in a bar upstairs, build a bar out and cater it upstairs to service any parties or.
And would it still be only, would you still only be able, because I remember, I think the reason you did the original, like downstairs premise license, because I think originally it was the bar like just for your members.
Correct.
So with this different license, would it still be, would it only be catering situations, or does it essentially allow you to just open your doors to the public and have, there's a bar in Durham?
No. So the off-premise license, or so the on-premise, the bar license, the club aspect of it is still members only.
Okay.
It's still a private fraternity, and you have to be a member to access the downstairs area regardless, unless you're a guest of a member.
Yeah.
If we were to cater upstairs, that upstairs, again, would still be, okay, so I want to have a baby shower. I throw a baby shower, I'm renting the hall out upstairs. I'm just getting it catered. I can invite all the people that I want, but we're upstairs. The only place that they can be is the rental area of the upstairs.
Oh, they can't go.
They can't go
downstairs.
downstairs. They can't access that downstairs.
And that's defined by the license, not just your own in-house rules.
Both.
Okay.
It's, the National AMVETS has bylaws that say the whole membership and fraternity thing, and then the license itself restricts that.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
If you, sometimes you guys have like maybe a Halloween dance or some type of festive dance or something.
Sure.
Would you allow these selling alcohol during those events, even if it's an event that you're holding?
So we have talked about this in our meetings. We're gonna put it into our bylaws on what happens if a member wants to rent the upstairs hall. And so we would no longer, if we wanted alcohol up there, we would have to rent the hall out from ourselves and on that rental agreement, check, yes, I would like it catered. And yes, bring up our own bartender in-house, but still have the documentation so I'm the finance guy, but I want to hold a cornhole tournament upstairs. I would go to the members and say, I'd like to rent the upstairs out. And in our bylaws, we can make it, it goes to a vote, just like anything else, we can make it, okay, well, if a member wants to rent the upstairs, you don't have to pay full price, or you don't have to,
Right, so you could rent it to, for lack of better words, you for $1, and you can kind of circumnavigate the licensure.
Or your own, so even,
Yeah.
would that apply even to like your own fundraisers? You know, like, you know, maybe I'm asking the same question a different way.
Kind of.
You asked.
It's pretty much the same question.
liability shift. It's a liability shift, basically, yeah, it's a liability shift, because now I'm renting the hall. Even though I'm a member there, I'm renting the upstairs portion. And so then I fill out all the paperwork and I sign that I want to cater, and now it's on me as the ledger, not the finance officer at the campus.
What do you mean by it's on you, like the alcohol portion, because they're the licensee.
The liability, so on there, and I have to call our insurance back. The AMVETS Hall can either do one of two things: increase our liability insurance to cover that party that's having their place, or we can ask the people that are renting out the hall to have their own insurance for that purchases. And so that whole rental agreement is still being worked out on how we're actually going to circumnavigate those questions.
But it doesn't really impact the license. The license is the license.
The license is the license, correct?
My only thing is, if you ever want to hold a function, or if they want to hold a function, you can have it almost every night. Just charge a member $1.
Yeah, like, yeah, I mean, we're having an event.
Right.
Exactly.
And I'm invited, everybody's invited.
Yeah.
Bad idea, didn't think of that.
Well, I mean,
It's a valid point. It's a valid
So,
point.
yeah, I mean, I guess that is a risk, and then that's where I believe that any license holder, whether it's the club without catering or with catering or any, you still need to come to the town for renewal every year.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and I was reading through some stuff earlier about, that was attached to this about, because I wasn't sure whether a hearing was required, and it's not required. It says the municipal officials may hold a hearing.
Right.
But that's part of where, like, depending on what the end use vision was going to be or is, that may or may not influence whether we felt the hearing was necessary or not, you know, like, if after, to your point, and I do not for a second think this would happen, but if for some reason, you know, years down the road when, you know, somebody else is in charge, then the board could basically, you know, deny the renewal of the license. Yeah, so,
No, I'm good with it. I was, I guess where I was going with it was, when it said the liability changed. Because if you're catering an event, I would see how that would change the liability of the onus to the person renting.
If we particular,
If they're providing.
if that scenario where I'm.
Right, the
You're
onus,
serving.
the onus would be on the person serving, but, so that's why that question.
okay.
I think both of them, it's a valid point, it's a very valid point. But at the same time, we do honor the fraternity of it all. We don't want, nobody in the membership wants it to turn into, like, you have to be a veteran to be part of that organization.
All right, is there a motion to approve the club with catering application from the AMVETS?
So,
By Josh. Is there a second?
yeah,
All right, any further discussion? All right, remember, for this to pass, because there's only 3 of us here, for it to be approved, all 3 of us need to vote. Yes, so all in favor of approving the club with catering application for the Durham AMVETS? Okay, we have a 3-0 vote. All right, great, thank you very much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're just gonna come back to visit every once in a while?
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
I was hoping to stay for the next one, but I guess it's.
Yeah, that one's, so next we have a report from the fire chief.
Before before he gets home, so Calvin's sick,
Okay.
so he can use a little bit. Tonight, but you have his.
He probably needs a little bit of rest anyway. Well, you probably need a little bit of rest too, chief.
Nah, I hope to convince you on my three things. That is true. We'll start real quick for the board. Minimum wage for the state increases by $1.05 an hour, January 1st. So it is $12.75. It goes to $13.80. That'll affect roughly 14 members from the fire department are based on minimum wage. So the support personnel, some of the younger staffing, non-EMTs, non-per diems. So roughly 14 members will be getting a raise, minimum wage, but of course that affects the budget also with hours trained, hours on calls, that type of stuff.
Is that built into your budget for?
It will be for the 2023. Yeah, we're figuring that out right now.
What was that minimum wage again?
Minimum wage, $1.05 an hour goes to $13.80. So just on your radar. We'll talk real quick about the December 23rd storm. Roughly 14 to 15 calls for service for the fire department, mostly wires down, trees down, blocking roads. What we found out was that this building, this turns into an EOC, an Emergency Operations Center. Over your shoulder, someone is writing down all the roads, they're writing down where the blockages are, you know, rerouting stuff, certainly working with Calvin. I talked to him 15, 20 times. Good teamwork for his staff, our staff here. I appreciated it. So the public knows, though, when a larger storm comes in, we go through our dispatch and say, hey, we're on scene, hey, the road's shut down. Dispatch calls in really CMP. They have an EOC in Lewiston, and they sort of take over. So we don't get ETAs from CMP unless it's a major thoroughfare, the three roads that we have, 125, 36, and 9. They are on their own timetable. Unless it's an emergency, as I'll get into, like a structure fire, we cannot dictate how fast they get here. Route 125 was completely shut down for hours and hours. The reciprocal is I don't get notified when it's open. So unless Calvin and his crew are on the road, or my crew or myself are driving to town again, I don't know when those roads are open. So it's difficult for the public to call here and just say, hey, do you have an ETA? Can I get home? Can I get through to 125? Do I have to go all the way around, Thompson, Lisbon time? I can't answer that. I'm embarrassed. I'm sorry, but I can't. Same thing with power, restoration. I don't get that either. They're on their own. So just so everyone's aware and if you're aware, I don't think it's anything new. It'd be like a wire down on country lane. I cannot force people to get there any faster or give an ETA of when that is.
Not that Rich actually asked for that.
And he did not, right? He did not, but that turns into a school bus.
A week later.
Is that the answer?
A week later, I asked, hey, Calvin, is somebody gonna get on that?
So that, and that's a public safety issue when the school bus cannot turn around with, in theory, live wire, because every wire is treated live. And I know it was brought up recently on social media on Bowie Hill, a legitimate primary line down across Bowie Hill that I don't want anyone to touch or take it upon themselves. So we set up cones, barricades, but we did not block off Bowie Hill. That's a decision that keeps me up at night. Like, I don't want a bus stop to be there or a child to be bicycling through and say, hey, I'll get this wire out of the road. That's a primary and it's considered live. So it wasn't until yesterday that they were there. So very difficult decisions. They really are. So that's the storm. We ended the storm with a structure fire. We had extra staffing here on Bowie Hill structure fire. They were every truck, 6 trucks, including the rescue, on scene, made an incredible stop, saved the entire house, bathroom fan caught on fire, went up into the attic, they saved it. Good job. 2 days later, we go back to the same house yesterday for a structure fire. Completely different. This is a wood stove in the basement that they're using. They have no power, just trying to prevent the pipes from freezing. Ashes got combustibles going, and they had a full-blown basement fire. So again, full response, and this time, Lisbon, Freeport, Pownell on scene, and again, crews had to make entry with a line and
prevent the house from going up. A lot of smoke and water damage, so that they are out of the house. I've talked to the owner several times, making arrangements. American Red Cross has been called, so we've had 2 structure fires, sort of unrelated to the storm, but related.
Yep.
For that. Several EMS calls on Christmas Eve with transports and several on Christmas. And again, your volunteers come out Christmas Eve, Christmas. I think the first one was 12:30 at night or 0:30 hours on Christmas Eve. There's 5 guys there, so I want you to know it without names, but it is incredible to watch that they leave their own family to go help others. Last but not least, in front of you and in that packet is a Comstar, that's our ambulance billing company, ambulance billing service rate. I'll wait till we're on the same page. The first column you can see is what really Medicare allows. The second column is, and Comstar does about 200 fire departments. So their top 50 is the going rate, and then that final column is actually what we charge.
Is this a per call?
Yes, well, it's per call, but per how you code it. So a BLS is a basic life support, so that's an EMT. You could have a paramedic, but they're only doing a basic skill, bleeding, that type of stuff, control, mental health evaluations, those types of things. You can see ALS1, ALS2, you know, that's the difference between sort of a heart monitor, giving pharmacological interventions, drugs, that type of stuff, IVs. And then the mileage is a perfect example. So you can see what Medicare allows or will reimburse, really. You'll see what the average for the top 50 is, almost 5 times that, and our current rate. So I don't need a vote tonight. Doubling our rates don't even come close to average. It would be my recommendation after you all discuss, and I'm sure you'll have further questions, because we can do this at any time. This is not a time-dependent decision. At any month, we can raise our rates. It has not been done since we came on board and contracted with Comstar. So I know Jill, you know, asked the question, how long does it take a member to be trained? Currently, the fire chief's been here 15 months, and this is the first that I've dug deep enough to get into fees and schedules, because you're dealing with other things. So it'd be my recommendation for you all to just go with the average bundle, you know, top 50. Average is still average.
Can you tell me how that works? Like, so, like, yeah, what's the money trail here? Like, who's paying what?
Sure, let's do ALS 2, so that'd be 1, 2, 3, the fourth one down, right above mileage, right? So we take a legitimate heart attack, and we only have 2 hospitals to choose to transport, so that's CMMC or MaineMed, and we just had one the other day, legitimate, having a heart attack. Medicare says, and that's without Medicaid and without supplemental, but Medicare says we'll allow you $670 for that.
Allow who? The person you transported? Or?
Allow the person to be billed, or that they'll cover. The max that they'll cover their.
Because ultimately, what I'm trying to understand here is who's paying the difference between, if it was average bundle for the sake of argument, if that's what we charge.
Sure.
And Medicare is paying,
So
whatever's in column 1, who's paying the difference?
Medicare will pay that. Individuals have Medicaid, individuals have private pay, they have supplemental, or they have that they make up the difference.
So an individual's insurance would pay.
One of four things: individual, supplemental, out of pocket. Which I can show you the breakdown from Comstar, without names. It'll just say, hey, you had 300 transports, this is how much private, this is how much Medicare, that type of stuff. We're leaving, in my opinion, just money on the table.
Yep.
As you can see just on that example, we're almost 200, right? 185 or whatever it ends up being, that we're not even charging. I mean, we're not even
charging
reaching,
Medicare.
yeah, we're not even reaching Medicare status.
Do you know, like, when Comstar gives you this information, the average bundle top 50, like, top 50 drawn from
The New England region.
New England?
Not
Okay, thank you. And is there any distinction made between, like, customer or their clients that are, the part-time per diem, like we are, versus a full-time professional, like City of Lewiston type of department?
No, because they don't know the difference of employees, so
Okay.
it's just billing.
Okay.
In my opinion, our staffing, which a lot of them work full-time other places, Auburn, Brunswick, Bath, United Ambulance, which contracts with Lewiston. So those same individuals that work here. So it's not the employee's skill level.
Oh, sure.
I mean, it's the
Right, yeah.
license, clearly, paramedic. They don't get into per diems or what's,
I guess
what
what
the
I'm getting
makeup
at is,
of the department.
with a part-time per diem force, you're not trying to cover the cost of benefits, for example.
Correct.
Whereas with the City of Lewiston, they're definitely trying to cover the cost of benefits
For a profit.
and whatever else.
Yes.
that they do.
That is a true statement. What we do get into, if you're right about benefits, fire service, as I talked to before, is really fire-based EMS, just like here in this building, is really supplemented by the town and the taxpayers.
Yep.
That supplement could be reduced.
So I think the idea in general is something that I could get behind. What it seems to me though, it's almost a tax on the people who are using the services, right?
Yes.
So what percentage of the people that would see the increase are Durham residents as opposed to residents of another jurisdiction?
I don't know if I have that information.
That's always the question that comes up is.
Yeah, every time the chief, our previous chief would ask, that would be my first, how do we?
Sure.
How do we charge?
And you can't have separate whoever.
Right.
Correct, you can.
You can't charge like Durham residents, like
Yes.
not charge Durham residents, but charge.
Right, and then, and this is a question I expect you to know, the other thing, that I would wanna, Medicare charges X. That's probably not there are insurance companies that probably reimburse at a lower rate. So,
I'm not sure. I think the government is the lowest rate going
Yeah.
for reimbursement.
I think that's.
Everything else is higher than that, unless you're private pay. I understood that this decision for you all will need more information. I can poll Comstar for some of it, so you all can make an informed decision on an increase if that's what you deem.
I'd be curious, like, where do the top 50, what are they basing their fees on? Like, are they just, 3,500 sounds good, let's charge that? I mean, or is there some, like, where does the number come from? You know what I mean? Like, are they actually doing some sort of a cost calculation and try to charge true cost, or? And do we have a true cost calculation? Maybe that's the question.
I was just trying to do that in my head.
Because I think it's certainly fair that we should look to recover costs.
Sure.
But I'm open to discussion, but I think it's probably more of a reach if we're charging 3 or 4 times what our actual costs are and looking at it as a revenue source.
Yes.
So that would be a different thing.
I can get you the more information that you need.
It's a good discussion to have, and I know you weren't expecting us to vote on anything tonight, but I think it's good, especially as we head into budget season. I think in a lot of areas to make sure that whatever fees we have are appropriate and that we're covering our costs.
Your questions help me gather more information and get back to you to make that informed decision. So that's what we're doing tonight.
Yeah,
Just,
exactly.
again, on the radar, but those are the rates, and it is time to rate. I mean, you can see where, you know, a third of just the mileage per mile.
That's
And-
per mile, $8.40 per mile.
That's what Medicare will give you, $8.40 a mile. So for everyone listening, $8.40 is just reimbursable Medicare, and we're just talking Medicare.
Yeah.
Different, you know, private companies, Blue Cross and Blue Shield, other ones may give you more.
So, and I guess maybe I want to understand a little bit better how Comstar works. So we perform a service and Comstar bills, like,
Yeah.
who, like, I guess I'd like to understand their process a little bit, like, what do they do? And they say, okay, we went to Medicare for this, and then we went here, and then we went there, and then we tried 3 different sources to bill out for this, and is that what they're doing?
Yes, because they garner more when they receive more. So we have a contract with them, flat rate, usually per call, and then it's a percentage.
So if
That can
somebody,
be negotiated, but
yeah, so for somebody in one of these average top 50 communities, if you know, if they're on Medicare and they needed a service, but they had no other insurance, they're gonna get a bill from Comstar to pay out of pocket the difference between the Medicare reimbursement and the.
Yes. Yes. Which is always, again, the board's delicate dance of
Yeah.
trying to take care of the taxpayers and the people, in this case Durham, or others that use our service. Now, I've been prepping everyone about other towns, because there's private ambulances around here and us being abused or picking up the slack or mutual aid. That only increases. If it helps, and I'll get you the information, our call volume is up another 5% probably for the year. Now, those are small numbers, but we've been trending, I think it was 6%, 15%, probably at least 5% this year. Those are just trending 911 calls.
Are you saying, or is it your opinion that the fees we charge influence how often we get called?
No,
Okay,
not the fees, but the use of our staffed rescue.
Yeah.
Is being called on more and more.
okay. You're not saying because we have a really low fee, they're calling
not
us
because of
because
the
we're the
fee.
cheaper option?
Because we are,
Okay.
no, but because we are staffed, because even at night when it becomes a volunteer service, if you will, people will still come. And the staffing, the members are top notch, so.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very good
They
responsive.
they are,
So-
so the town ought to be reimbursed for that, because the town's paying up front.
Yep.
The town ought to be reimbursed.
Chief, I agree, especially with the Medicare portion of it. I mean, we should release them, when we get Medicare, right? I would agree with that 100%. The only thing I would ask within the top 50 is, you said this was the top 50 of the New England area.
Yes,
Is there any way to do a top 10 of similar towns?
I can look at that.
Only because, I'm assuming, what happens when you assume, like, I live out on Martha's Vineyard and I gotta get to, Maine Med or something.
Sure.
Or I can take a,
Old Bluffs to a ferry, to
Yeah, it
a
could-
transfer.
Yeah,
yes.
exactly. I mean,
Yes.
that could really skew the
Numbers.
average.
Yeah.
So I didn't know, if we could look at it from the perspective of just similar towns offering similar services rather than a blanketed approach
Or-
of all of New England.
Or even average across the entire region, not just the average of the highest 50, right?
But with most hospitals, and again, I could be wrong on this, but in the past, their base would be set up the Medicare rate. As far as any typical procedures, that, like, for example, if you went in for heart surgery, we're gonna pay $22,000 for the surgery, we're gonna pay $500 a night for ICU, and $350 for general.
I think you're looking at it differently. I think
Am I looking at this differently than what this presentation is?
hospitals would charge a lot because they're writing off a lot. And they're
Right.
writing
Oh, yeah.
off the Medicare side of things.
Sure.
Because a lot of people, when you get into those $30,000, $50,000 heart attacks, strokes, that type of stuff with care afterwards, either out of pocket or they just can't afford it, a socioeconomic problem. So they have to write off. So they're charging high because their write-offs are high. On our case, the town is supplementing the rescue at, a dollar amount really. But we need to recoup as much as we can for that supplemental.
I guess, see, to me, I hear what you're saying, but it's kind of the same. I don't know, see the difference.
Well, we're both from, the South Shore of Massachusetts, so that's.
That could be what the issue is, right?
That is the issue. Right, clearly the issue.
It's a good conversation to have. I think, I know you've taken some notes on some of the questions we've asked, so let's keep the conversation
Sure.
going and try to land somewhere that makes sense, balancing all the various, considerations.
As you can see, I won't be great, we are even woefully under even what Medicare offers. I mean, we're not even charging that. And again, I don't think the fee has been updated in years, so. But I will get you those answers.
Yeah, and there might be an intermediate step here, like maybe a short-term action is to change the rates to at least get to the Medicare reimbursement.
Sure.
And then maybe there's a larger discussion about how much, if at all, we go beyond that.
Yeah, I'd be perfectly fine with doing that. I have no issue with that.
Okay. Again, no structure fires, no injuries. The first one ended roughly 10,000 in damage, and the second one was 75,000, roughly in damage. So
Same property.
same problem.
Sure.
They do have insurance. I haven't looked into the rider of it. I was a little worried about housing and whatnot. So, we just came back from Parliament for the water structure fire. So, any other questions? The storm, I was gonna get you a dollar amount, actually, how much the storm cost the town, just that one storm, and it's thousands.
Do we know if there's any like federal emergency reimbursement money?
So they're
Should be
still,
coming from
correct, they're still doing the dollar figure, but it's very difficult unless people go through FEMA for like food loss or damage to the house, that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So a lot of times we are way under the state, sort of getting reimbursed.
Yeah.
I always do it, and I always have it, being the emergency management,
Yeah.
through the EOC and through the EMA, through Androscoggin. So there's damage, but there's not, we didn't have trees through houses, we didn't have physical damages to people, that type of stuff, so.
Sorry. So I also want to read, the respect that the department has throughout town. It's something I don't think every community has. So congratulations on that to everybody. Thank you for explaining the road closure bit, because there was a closure near my house, and it was there, the signs were there, but people were driving through, so we didn't know what was going on. And I had another question, I just forgot it. So,
Thank you. Those accolades go straight to the members that are here. Again, I don't want to guess on the dollar amount, but those storms cost the town. And that's what it's there for, and it's budgeted for, and whatnot, and there's no injuries, but I think I have at least 12 to 15 members here and running calls for at least 24 hours.
there was a question.
So close.
There was a question on the Facebook page today about a warming center.
Oh, thank you. So we decided to do a regional warming center, even though the fire department was open and staffed. We got one call from a family member wanting a warming center, and Lisbon's police department was the warming center for this area. So that information was provided. We also get into home oxygen use. So we only have like an extra generator, but some in town that are on home oxygen use, when they start 12, 24 hours without their own power generation, they can't make their own oxygen at home, and they need to be transported or oxygen dropped off. So one individual brought a special generator for them to use. Now that doesn't generate a call, that goes sort of unwitnessed, but those things happen. That's just Durham taking care of Durham.
So then I think if, you know, when the next time happens, I think some way publicizing the warming center issue
Okay.
might be something that wasn't widely understood.
No, thanks, we can do that. I had a discussion today with the town manager about the appropriate social media aspect of that. Clearly, that's one of them.
Yeah.
And trying to get it to the town webpage. That's all.
And that was the first place I looked, was the town.
Sure,
The town.
and that's where it should be,
Yeah.
rather than Facebook pages. It should be either fire department related and tagged to the town. And we can do better with social media.
Great,
Thank
thank you very much. Okay, you have your notary now? Oh, Jess is here, that's all right.
Can I, Calvin's not here. Can I just a feedback on that, maybe you could follow up, but I have a couple, people ask me about after these storms, there's massive amount of debris left in the road, sometimes stacked up on the side of the road or stacked up on guardrails, like going around Route 9, it looks like, you know, to keep people out of Dead Man's Corner, we got like, you know, Fort Wilderness set up in there. Good luck if you go over. Are they gonna address that, they being public works, some of these?
I would assume that there's debris in the road.
Well, it's not necessarily, it might be a couple trees that they stacked up on the side of the road, it might be, in this case, on Route 9, like this
On the
one over by,
shoulder.
it's on the shoulder, it's sticking into the road.
So what happens is to get that tree out of the road, what they do is they go there with a loader and they push it out of the way
Right.
to the side until they can get to it to kind of. Now, we don't have one person in Public Works today. Rest of them are out. There's a few sick, Calvin's sick. So I'm assuming they'll get to those trees.
Yeah, these are all cut up, what I'm
Oh,
saying
they're
is,
already.
they're all cut up, they get stacked, or they get put over the embankment, like on the Route 9, probably Route 9 going around the Dead Man's Curve there. You know, so you have things sticking out over the guardrail per se. Will those eventually be gone by?
They should.
Because some of them are from, not this storm, they're from,
I'll
previous
talk to
ones.
Calvin about
That's
that.
all. Okay.
He's going to.
that's why.
I can't imagine we would.
I didn't know if it was like the CMP thing, when they come and cut the top, you know, your
You
trees.
may not know about
Right,
it, yeah,
exactly.
you may not know about it.
CMP actually.
Right.
Just-
Right.
While we're talking about Dead Man's Curve, who's in charge of deciding the passing area on the Lisbon side of that curve? Because I almost had an unpleasant experience with the Jeep where he had to come get me out, so I'm passing right there.
So that'd be the DOT. They're responsible for all the signs, stripes.
That's what I thought, but
All that, for the most part, on their roads especially.
But if you can certainly, you can draft a letter as a selectman in expressing your concern, and we can send that to DOT on town letterhead.
Right.
just the second time I've seen someone pass there, the second time I almost got hit head on.
Where is it exactly?
Right on, right after you go through, it's, I mean,
In the
it's
center of the road that's passing?
just when you go to, on the Lisbon side, just when you start going up the hill, there's a passing lane there. I never noticed, I never noticed it till this week, and, you know, someone decided to pass a dump truck, and I just slammed on my brakes, and
Yeah, I'd definitely. DOT.
Okay. All right, so next item 8 on the agenda is a quick claim deed. We actually saw this last meeting, but we didn't realize we had 2 of these. We had one, and before we get to the second one, our notary went home. But she's with us tonight. This is another case where the town had foreclosed on the property for a non-payment of taxes. The property owner has since met the tax obligations, so the process is for us to issue a quick claim deed, basically transferring the property back to the owner and releasing our lien. So, I would move that we issue the quick claim deed as presented for the property at 128 Old Durham Road, tax map 6, 114B. So Josh seconds. Any discussion or questions on this one? Okay, all in favor? Okay. All right. You watching?
Yeah, you have the original that has the receipt.
Yeah,
attached to it?
yeah, he gave me the original,
Yep.
yep.
The notary is watching.
Okay. Oh, this is my favorite thing. Let's talk about the new solid waste contract. So our current contract is up at the end of June,
June
right?
30th, yep.
And so we have an RFP before us, very similar to the one we sent out last time.
Yes.
To ask for bids, basically.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, the quick claim deed,
Oh.
Josh hadn't signed it yet. Oh, I thought he had. Great, thank you, Jess, for
No
being here for
problem.
that. Okay.
So, yes,
You need, yeah, go
So
ahead.
you have an RFP before you. This is the same RFP that went out 3 years ago. What I've done is just change the dates, a few other small edits, but it's basically the same thing. This one would start July 1st of 2023 and run till June 30th of 2026. If that's what you choose to do. Other than that, that's about it. I've updated the tonnage. What you see in yellow, yours is probably not yellow. I'm waiting for the 2022. Maybe those ones in yellow down below. I'm just waiting for the 2022 numbers to come in. Maybe we don't even have to wait, maybe we've got enough information where we can send it out. Tonnage is there for the last 2 years. I plan on sending it to Casella, Waste Management, Triana, and Riverside, the 4 that I know of. Plus it'll go on the main municipal website, it'll go on our website, to make sure we get bids. I'll probably put it up for 3 weeks. 3 weeks may seem like a long time, but if you're gonna have other bidders that are gonna look at this RFP carefully, they need to scope out the area and make sure they can get what they're bidding on, they can get bids, but it's pretty much ready to go.
I had one question, and it was probably like this 3 years ago, and I never caught it, and it may not matter because of the way Appendix A is worded, but in the body of a contract, number 8, recycling standards, where it says the recycled materials to be collected shall consist of, and it lists a bunch.
Yep.
Okay, page 5. It lists, it only lists number 2 and number 1 plastic. Yet in Appendix A, which is I think what we want, it lists plastics number 1 through number 7, not just number 1 and number 2. So just, again, I think Appendix A, because probably trumps what's in 8, but it might be good to just have the language be consistent.
Yeah.
So if we wouldn't want someone to come back to us and say, well, we only contracted to take number 1 and number 2 plastic,
Right.
you guys are throwing everything made out of plastic.
So we want to reflect what's in.
Yeah,
Appendix A.
yeah. That was the only other thing I noticed. And we still, the last contract 3 years ago was the first time that we asked for, and we're asking again, which is good, for the bid to break out and provide separate fees for bulky waste and
Yes.
universal waste, because the idea would be to put that question on the warrant separately, like we've done the last year or two, to see if the town wants a bulky waste getting on. Do you,
So I don't really need it, I just share. I
Yep,
just let
no,
you
yeah, we
know
don't need
that-
to approve
that-
this, you're-
Right, we're ready, I'm gonna go up to bid with this as soon
Yep.
as I can.
Great.
Finish it up. Just so you know, I did call Casella to see if they would give me some sort of budget number. They did not give me one where it's going out to bid. I don't really know why they wouldn't, but I didn't want their bid number. I just wanted like a, you know, because keep in mind, the last contract is 3 years old, so this was before the pandemic increases. So I suspect we're gonna see
It would
a
be,
bump.
yeah, and I think in the past, you know, even if and I don't know if this would be, it might be good to do it sooner rather than later before we get deep into this, to have somebody come and give us kind of a state of the union, you know, solid waste. They've done that in the past where, like, what's going on in the market. Like, remember when we signed the last contract, that was right when the recyclable market tanked, and what we were paying for recyclables went through the roof. And so it would be good just to kind of like, you know, what's going on in the solid waste market now versus 3 years ago, the last time we looked at a contract. Because that would inform, the better we know the market, the better we're gonna be able to evaluate, you know, bids, proposals.
You can call it Andy. See if you- It's Andy, right? We talked to her. So.
There's a woman that came in.
Yeah, there was a woman, well, two people came last
Yeah,
time.
she's not our person anymore.
Yeah, and then, yeah, so it'd just be good to know, like, kind of what's going on in that world right now as we look at a new contract. Okay,
Yeah.
all right, and we're on to your report, sir.
Yeah, believe it or not, with Christmas and everything, I don't have a lot to report. I will piggyback on what Chief was talking about as far as fees and schedules. So in 2023, we're gonna come to a meeting with a bunch of fee schedules. We're working with Alan, codes enforcement.
Good.
On our fee structures, because they really do need to be updated.
And we passed an article, just last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember, where we basically, we bring a new, it doesn't go to town meeting or anything, but, you know, the board votes on a fee schedule for the year.
Yeah.
You know, it's,
And Alan's putting that together right
Good.
now. So we're looking at that. Other than that, like I said, John Talbot couldn't be here because he wants to talk about the article language on affordable housing.
Yep.
But no, things have been going good with in the office. It's been smooth sailing for the most part. You know, I'm pretty much digging into the budget, getting ready for budget. We had a budget meet and greet. I thought that went pretty well. Some of the budget committee members said, yeah, they can speak otherwise, but just gearing up for that budget. You know, 4 months in, trying to figure it all out it's challenging, but on a positive side, because I mean, I'm learning a lot about the budget, the previous budgets, and what we have and don't have, and what we should have and shouldn't have, that sort of stuff. So it's good.
yeah, and I know, you know, someone raised the issue earlier about, well, it feels like we've been in this swirl for, you know, a long time, and we have, but, you know, you weren't here for that whole time, and we're, you know, I look at that first experience almost as like a false start, and we kind of had to go back to square one. So we're considering that you're only 4 months in. I think, you know, we're making really good
We're
progress.
getting there for sure. Once I'm comfortable with those bottom line numbers, then it's like a bust.
Yep.
But I just didn't really want to share many numbers because I wasn't comfortable with them or didn't really quite understand. There is a lot of commingling with different sections of the budget, and that makes it difficult to put together.
And
It really does.
just to clarify, you know, we use commingling in the free, and to mean confusing, not necessarily nefarious.
Right,
Right?
absolutely, yeah, it's just, right, absolutely. I think, no, there's nothing like that.
They usually do.
When you have someone that's been here a long time and they know that, it's easy for them to understand.
Right.
But when someone new comes in and tries to get inside that head, that's where it becomes challenging. But all's good, we're in good shape.
Great. All right, so we are to the tail end here. Consent agenda, which basically just has the minutes and the payables warrant. Do we have the payables warrant?
Yeah.
entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. So Josh moves. I'll second. Rich seconds. All in favor? Okay, we're 3-0 on that. Upcoming meetings, Select Board and Budget Committee, we started those meetings, January 10th, 6:30 at the Eureka Center. We're gonna start at 6 o'clock,
Yes.
regular board meeting that night,
Yeah,
and do the board business
first.
like, like warrant and things like that. And then we'll move into the, co-meeting with the budget.
Budget presentation. And then on the 12th, it'll be the department heads giving their budgets.
Okay. All right. Do we need an executive session tonight?
Nope.
Entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. I'll second. All in favor? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.